with Pam of Perfectly Holistic. Pam is generous enough to record all of this for me because I'm a little inept technically. So thank you very much, Pam, for being here.
You're welcome.
Today we're going to talk about raw food because Charlie and Trigg are on raw. 98% help from Pam for doing so. The other 2% was me actually giving it to them. So I wanted to talk to Pam about why we were put on raw, and then how, and then also, it might not be in this order, but also how Pam started her cats on raw. So how it started, or how Pam's and my relationship started, in case you missed our last video, is that I purchased a service that Pam provides called Optimal Cat Health Analysis. And I was very desperate with my cat, Charlie. He's a 13-year-old Ragdoll. He had multiple food and environmental sensitivities that I was calling allergies. And Pam has helped him detox from that and heal his leaky gut and other things that were going on inside of him. And in that process of working through the steps that she guides you through, food is the number one aspect to that whole thing. Let food be thy medicine is same for us as it is for cats. And so eventually, when we started out, Charlie was on 2 tablespoons of dry food a day, and then the rest were canned, and Chiggy was eating only canned. And Pam said, our goal is to get them to raw. And I was like, yeah, right. I wanted it. It's always been my goal. But I tried at 6 years old. I tried everything. I, made our own, bought a meat grinder, did everything, and it did not work. They wouldn't take to it. And so I was like, well, it's a good end goal, Pam, but I don't think it's going to happen. And here we are 6 weeks into eating raw. It might be 2 months. I'm not sure. But anyway,
it's been a while.
Yes. Will you talk to us about why raw is so important for a cat's diet?
Absolutely. First of all, we have to go back to their biology. If you look at the way they are designed, they have a jaw that goes up and down, does not go side to side. So they're not meant to grind their food. They're not really even meant to chew their food. They really gulp and tear because that's the way their teeth are shaped. That's how cats eat in the wild. And they have a very short digestive tract. So if you ever watch your cats, they eat and then they go right to the litter box. Everything. I mean, it may not be the same meal that they're pooping out, but it's going in and out. So we don't have to worry about like toxic food. They're not going to want to eat toxic food. If it's spoiled, they're going to turn their nose up to it and go, no, thank you. So cats can handle raw food. They can handle bacteria. They have a very acidic stomach. So if there's anything that's not good for them in that food, it's going to kill it. So you don't have to worry about, raw food harming your cat. That's how they are biologically designed. If you look at cats in the wild, they hunt, catch, kill, and eat. They don't go to the store and go buy a bag of kibble or go buy, canned cat food. They eat fresh. They eat raw. They eat the organs, the meat, the bones, the intestines. I mean, there's just so much nutrition in the way they're biologically designed to eat with a natural diet. So those are all like really good reasons when you consider how they're designed. Number one, when we feed our cats wrong, that's when we start to see health issues. And one of my biggest goals in terms of getting people to feed their cats better is stopping the dry food, because there's so many reasons why cats should never eat dry food ever. And I used to feed the dry food because that's what I saw my parents do when I was growing up. So I thought that's what cats were supposed to eat. So fast forward many years later, we realized that that's really the worst thing that you can eat, because cats are carnivores. They are not herbivores. And dry food has so many starches, which is carbohydrate based. We're talking 30 to 60% carbohydrate in cat food, when cats biologically need about 0% carb. Okay. They can handle about 2 to 7%. You get higher than 10, they're going to start looking at issues. So when we're feeding our cats the wrong diet to begin with, you're already setting yourself up for problems. So those are like just my two biggest reasons why we need to get our cats on a better diet. When I started my cats on a raw diet, it was pretty simple because every cat's different. I get you that. But if you have a small cat, a kitten, 12 weeks or younger, or within a year, those are the best times to transition them onto a raw food because they are so much easier to work with versus your 16-year-old cat who is very set in their ways and wants what they've always had. But when I brought home my youngest, she came home with me from the people that I got her from, and they gave me a bag of kibble, even though she had been eating a combination of kibble and probably wet food, canned food at the time. I threw the kibble right in the trash and I said, "You're not eating that in my home. And by the way, here's your raw quail." And it was a grind. It was organ, meat, and bones and all mixed up. And I put it on the floor and she ate the whole thing and didn't even blink. So, it's not as hard as you think. It's just a lot of times it's the pet parent that has to get out of their head about the whole feeding raw process. So yes, it's possible. And you have to, number one, you have to be committed. A lot of people give up because, oh, their cat's not going along with your plan. You just have to understand that every cat's different. And so, but we have some tricks, don't we? We used with Trigg and Charlie for transitioning them. So yeah, where do you want to go from here? That's kind of my intro.
Well, first of all, if I was that cat, I'd been like, Lord, I am home. The food here is a lot better than at that other place. But also, she didn't have a chance to become an addict because you started her so young, and so that's just awesome.
Yeah.
So when Pam said like the goal is raw, I'm like, okay, they're gonna be 13 in a couple months. They are 13 now, but when we started, they were 12, and I was like, there's no chance. There's no chance that they'll ever. And I thought there's no chance that I'm gonna last to see this through, because the friend of mine who introduced me to Pam, we met through Floppycats. She was transitioning her cats so methodically, like she would increase by like a teaspoon every week of raw. Would take away the she had them on canned and raw, but she was like methodically doing it. And I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind if I have to do it that way. Like, I don't know if I can do it. I mean, I guess I'll try. But literally when I started, trying raw, what I did was Charlie and Trigg, because of Pam's help, were on canned only. She had removed, what is it? Energy block or something for dry.
We cleared the dry as a stressor and an addiction to the sugar. That's what we did.
Yeah.
Did we have to clear a block to wet? I know we had to clear a block to raw at least once, maybe twice. Some emotional stuff. There was some emotional stuff there we probably cleared too. Energetically. Yeah.
Yes. So, right. Pam's whole approach, if you missed our last video, is way different than anything you've probably heard of. She does muscle testing and energy clearings to help heal the body. And so it's an entirely different way to go about it. But a cat normally learns what to eat from its mother. And so a lot of times, if it learned to eat kibble or if it learned to eat wet food, then those are okay to present. But if it didn't learn about raw, then it's like, ew, what is that?
What is that?
They won't go after it. And so that's why you have to do such a long, slow transition if they're not game for it. And sometimes their microbiome can't handle the raw either straight away. I was working with, and I still do, with an animal communicator. Trigg has always had a stronger immune system. He got colostrum, which was, and Charlie did not. So it's not surprising to me that Trigg has a stronger immune system. But she told me that Trigg's microbiome was ready for raw, but Charlie's was not. And so we improved that with like fecal transplant pills and stuff like that. And so I've lost my my train of thought as far as where. So we were on the wet food, and then we discovered that Trigg was having some adverse reactions to the thickeners in the wet food, and I had to get him off of it. We didn't have a choice anymore. I had to get the transition going.
Yeah, because it was affecting his pancreas. It was causing some pancreatitis, and there was no other quality wet food that you had access to that didn't have those thickeners. So it was kind of like, this is a must do.
Yes. Yeah. It was do or die. And I started having like a panic attack, remembering, I don't even know if I've ever had a panic attack, but just like anxiety building. And I think about back to that time where you sent me that email or text message, and I was like, what? She's got to be kidding me. There's no way that we can do that fast. So Trigg did take to raw food immediately. He is my very undifficult cat, and praise him.
Yes.
Charlie, it was a little bit different. But how I started was that I went and bought a bunch of different kinds of commercial raw food, because one thing that I learned was there are so many ways that you can feed raw, but I don't want to make it at home. I have a difficult time eating meat myself, so I don't really want to make my own and use a completer and all that kind of stuff. So commercial raw was the way that I wanted to go, and I knew that. And you can, read up on raw and the different ways about it. And so I went to a local pet store here that carries a number of different brands, and learned about the different brands. Like there's some brands that use synthetic vitamins and some that don't. And it was important to me that there were no synthetic vitamins. So and they had some, come in pucks. So like pucks, and then some come in like little nuggets, and then some come in even smaller nuggets. And so I just got all of the varieties and everything and brought them home. And I started to add it to the wet food so that they got the smell of the raw with something that they already liked. And I felt like that would make a big difference. And so Chiggy was eating it, but Charlie was like, I'm going to eat everything but that little piece of raw that you put in there. I don't even remember. I mean, oh, that was the other thing, is like, I didn't want to put any energy towards it. So because I, had all that anxiety, and cats can feel all of that, no matter, if you're trying to hide it or not. They know you, and my cat's 13 years in, definitely know me. So traditionally, also, when I fed my cats, I prepare the meal and I put it down and I walk away. I don't put it down. That's why when we're like, reviewing a cat bowl and I'm sitting there with my camera, after I put down the food, they're like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Go away. Go away.
Excuse me. Bye.
Exactly. So I didn't want to do that either with raw, because I knew that they'd be like, something's fishy here. What's she trying to do? So we did that, and Charlie went for it. And I was like, oh my God, Pam, he went for it. And then 2 weeks later, I think it was, he was like, nope, don't want that anymore. And Pam, I reached out to Pam, and she said, I don't remember what we had to do, but I had to go back to wet food, and I felt like I had failed. I was like, we're done. I knew raw wouldn't work. And I think it was like 3 days where I couldn't give them raw.
It probably had to do with a protein. Yeah, I think it was a specific protein that he had. It was a stressor or something, and we needed a little break from it. Just a little break, because it was causing some GI stuff. And so I said, okay, I'm going to clear it as a stressor energetically, and let's give his digestive system a couple days without it so it can calm down and rebalance. And then you should reintroduce it. And then what happened?
Yes. It was not a protein. It was like spinach or kale or something that was in.
Oh, okay. Something in it. Okay.
Yes. And so we reintroduced it and it went well. I don't know if we did it twice or once or what.
You may have.
So one of the things, like, so Pam has done an optimal cat health analysis, the service that she offers with both of my cats. She did that in May, and then we've done several follow-ups. She offers like a checkup thing, and I've done that with her. So every time that we've done that, she finds things that Charlie and Trigg can't have, like a protein or something that they need a respite from, so that their digestive tract can rebalance. And got to the point where I thought, okay, I don't want to fight these little things that are in it. And several readers had told me about fetching foods. And that was kind of my goal. And also Pam talks about this a lot, but I do too, is to trust your intuition. And for me, I always knew, even if it wasn't Charlie and Trigg, my next cats, I wanted to try fetching foods. Like, I just felt good about it. And it was the food that I wanted to be on. And fetching foods is not sponsored this or anything. Like, literally,
No.
I've paid for everything from them. So I reached out to Troy with Fetching Foods and talked to him about what was going on. And he was very generous, and he is very, like, matter of fact, like, this is what you do, this is how you do it, and the cat will take to it. And the reason I think, and I hate to speak for him, why he's so confident is because they've had lots of foster cats where they're presented with a kibble cat, and within 48 hours, they've got that kibble cat on raw. And I'm like, okay, all right, I can do this. If you can do that with a kibble cat that you don't even know, I can do this with my cats. And so now my cats are on Fetching Foods, and I do sprinkle freeze-dried food on top. But I had a reader who was feeding freeze-dried raw, and she, felt really good about that. And you should. However, it's still dry food. It's not kibble, but it's dry food. So you're still not giving the kidneys the moisture that they need. So when I say that I put freeze-dried on top, I also add bone broth or water, or we're going to start adding dandelion tea. Then that helps that freeze-dried food get reconstituted. But the Fetching Foods is literally a ground complete meal. And it varies, but the reason Fetching is so cool is they have so many different proteins that many aren't even found in canned cat food. So the things that we're trying to clear Charlie and Trigg from, I could try a completely different protein and not have to worry about, avoiding things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also important to remember that each brand has their own recipe, and their foods are going to taste differently. So if your cat doesn't like Fetching Foods raw food, try Primal, try Vital Essentials, try Stella and Chewy's, try all these other brands out there. There's so many great brands now that you can try to just see what your cat prefers. It may be just a certain supplement in there that they just not crazy about. And like you said, some brands use whole foods for their vitamins and minerals to add it and make it a complete diet. And some brands add a few other supplements that are not whole food based. So it's just a matter of trying different ones and figure out what your cat prefers.
Yes. Yeah. And Pam, one of the first ones that I tried was small batch, because Pam was feeding small batch to her cats when I was transitioning then, and she really liked small batch. And another reader had told me about small batch too, when Camus was dying of renal failure. And I searched for it in Kansas City. That's where I live. And I couldn't find it, but something that's good to know, if you guys have a local pet store, like an independent pet store, or some of these new or like nationwide ones that are a little more cognizant and health conscious, they will have relationships like if they carry the dog food version of small batch, then they can order in the cat version, and they can, even with Primal, for example, there's a store close to me called Three Dog Bakery. It's not for cats, but they carry tons of primals, so they could order the cat primal for me. And at that time we were ordering pork, which wasn't like, they had chicken, they had turkey, they had duck, but they didn't have pork, and so I had to special order that. So there's so many options out there if you feel like, well, my cats don't like chicken, or my cats don't, that too.
Yeah. As long as those independent pet stores have distributorship with a brand, they can special order anything for you. You just have to ask, tell them what you were looking for.
Yes. And a lot of them too, Brookside Barkery here in town as well, not with special orders, but with the products that they carry, if your cat doesn't like it, you can return it, which is awesome as well. Because when you're going through these transitions into different foods, and you end up feeling like you're wasting a ton of money if the cats aren't eating it. So that's super nice. But also Pet People, which is recently bought out by Hollywood Feed here, same thing. They will refund you if your cat doesn't like it. So that made me feel better about trying different brands and seeing what would work.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to tell people, don't just expect your cat to take to it overnight necessarily. If, some cats may love it overnight, like Trigg. He's like, what took you so long, Mom?
Exactly.
And Charlie's like, what the hell is this?
Yes.
So, don't give up. Don't try one time and have your cat snub the food and you throw your hands up and go, well, that didn't work. You have to be crafty. For some cats, you have to sneak it into their wet food and mix it in really good. You have to maybe even take some of their dry food and crumble it on top as a topper to entice them to eat what's below it. So you have to be creative in some of this, and you have to be just persistent. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, and sometimes it takes days. So it really depends on the cat. But you have to go into it with a mindset like, I can do this. Because it's all about the attitude, it's all about the intention. If you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. Yes. So, you just have to decide, is this important? And is this what we're going to do? And go for it. So,
Yeah. And I think without Pam's help, I would have totally given up because my cats were like, we did do it twice, I think, because we had where Charlie stopped eating, and so we went back to can there. But then we had a problem with him vomiting after every meal, and I can't remember what. Pam is able to muscle test and figure out exactly what the reason is for the vomiting, and then we, she has to clear that, or we have to wait for it to be cleared, and then we can start over again. So, man. I don't know, Pam, if I could have done it without your help, because.
Well, one of the things that I've learned is that when you're introducing a new protein, a new texture, like a raw versus a dry or whatever, again, their brains can have a block to something. And it might be really, really healthy and beneficial for them, but they're like, ugh. So with energy work, we can go in and we can clear it as a stressor to their taste buds, to their stomach. The stomach holds the emotion disgust. So if your cat is throwing, like spewing it out because they're like, blah, I'm not eating that, or a supplement, they're throwing up or something, it could be just simply their body is viewing it with disgust. And so when you clear that, whatever food or raw food or wet food, whatever it might be, plus the emotion that might be linked to that, with their taste buds, with their stomach. It's amazing. It's like you've removed all the stress around that particular food, and then you reintroduce it, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is good."
Yes.
It's like magic. It's the most mind blowing thing.
Yes, it is. It
Yeah.
is. Well, and also if you're interested in transitioning to raw, again, these are the things that you learned that you're like, yeah, whatever. At first, but now I'm like, yes. I was having difficulty with Charlie and Trigg eating, and I've learned too, and I knew this, but whatever. You figure out stuff in hindsight. Seasonally, how they eat really varies, and so also be cognizant of what season you're in. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily suggest doing it, in a season transition from like summer to fall or whatever, because my cat's eating habits change. In my situation, we didn't have a choice. We just had to do it then, and it was done. But Charlie, will just eat less or whatever and stop. And so Pam had suggested start scheduled feeding times. And I'm like, well, I don't want to start scheduled feeding times because then that's more on me. And so I did not. And then when I talked to Troy with Fetching Foods, I said, Troy, what can I do now to get my cats ready for this? Like, because Fetching Foods is in Las Vegas, and then the food is shipped to you, and it takes there's a whole timeline of when you order and then when it's made and then it's shipped. So I had about 10 days before it was going to arrive, and he said, to read his FAQs and stuff on the site, and one was to have scheduled feeding times. And the reason for the scheduled feeding times is to help their hunger, so that they're very hungry to eat. And so traditionally what I had done is just put down the wet food in the morning, and then what wasn't eaten by the evening, I picked up and threw out, and then put down 2 more cans. But with the raw, I've started to do that with the raw now. But while we were transitioning, or while I was introducing it, I put it down, and then after 30 minutes, if it wasn't eaten, it was removed. And they came back and they're like, wait, where'd
it go?
What's she doing here? So I ended up doing that, and then that made them hungry to eat come dinner time. And now, at 9:00 at night, Charlie's on me. I know it's my time. Come on, where's my food? Right. So that really helped him want to eat it.
Well, and I think that's a very good point, and probably one of the biggest challenges for people who are feeding dry food and free feed. You have got to pick up the all-day buffet, because you have to understand that cats are carnivores. They're not grazers. They are hunt, catch, kill, eat, rest. So there needs to be periods of time when they are fasting, because that's when their body is resting, repairing, digesting, and it's better for their metabolic system rather than constantly eat throughout the day, all day long. Their body never has a chance to metabolically rest. So pick up the all-day buffet, and they're going to yell at you at first, but then you put them on a feeding schedule, like we talked about, like Troy says. Set your feeding times. If you want to feed them twice a day, you don't have to do it as soon as you get up in the morning. You decide what their schedule is going to be, and let hunger be your friend and let it work for you. And then just stick to your guns, because they will try to wear you down in the beginning if they're used to the all-day buffet. So I love that you were able to identify, like, ooh, let's pick this food up. And then next time that they come in, they're like, what'd you do with my buffet?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Bring my food back. It's like, nope, you gotta wait.
Yes.
So, and then they're willing. Then they're like, oh, thank God. And then they eat,
Yes.
And
you can start that with your canned now.
Yes, you can.
You can do that for a month before you even try raw. So that's what's cool about it too. I really appreciated that tip. But then Pam helps me know that my cats do better being fed 3 times a day. For where they are right now. And so that's what we do. We do 3 feedings a day. But I mean, again, you can, well, and Troy said, you know, you have to measure out the ounces and stuff with fetching foods. And he said, you know, if there's anything left in the bowl, then you fed them too much. They didn't need that much. And that's a big difference with raw for me is there's no waste.
Right.
Because if what they don't eat, you just, you know, present it at dinner. Whereas I was throwing out so much wet food. And that's one of the things that I learned from going to Brookside Barkery was I was told on the expensive to cheapest cat food, the most expensive is freeze-dried raw, then canned, then frozen raw, and then kibble. So actually frozen raw is cheaper than canned food. And I was like, oh, well, then why aren't we switching?
Right. Because they don't even eat as much. They don't need as much. When you're feeding them the exact nutrients that they need, without all the fillers and the thickeners and all this other stuff, their body is able to utilize that nutrition specifically with very little residue left over. So the bonus is now their cat poops are like this big, you know, so you're seeing in the cat box that they're absorbing their food instead of leaving it for you to scoop the next day. So my cats don't even eat as much. They eat a little bit less with the raw than they used to eat with cans. Because I truly believe it's because they're getting better quality nutrition that their body is able to absorb and utilize, and they don't need the excess.
Right. Yes. Well, and
then you end up spending less money because you're not having to buy all these cans. Cans are expensive.
Yes.
Food is so expensive. So you will be saving your money. Believe it or not, you will save money by switching to raw.
Yes. And yeah, speaking of poop, it is a lot different. Like the shape of it, the smell. I mean, everyone talks
smell.
about that.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's crazy, but it's amazing.
It's amazing. And yes, the size of the poops too. I mean, that's a nice thing about working with Pam or anyone that's being, you know, I think I asked on one of the raw groups, I was like, does anybody mind posting a picture of their cat's raw poop for me? Because I really wanted to make sure that Charlie and Trigg's poops were right because it changed so much. That I was like, wow.
Bonus.
Yeah. And that's just exciting to think like what they're eating is being absorbed and oh man. Yeah.
It's awesome. And you see the change in their coat, in their eyes, their skin, their energy. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's what a healthy cat should look like.
Yes. Yes. And thank you for bringing that up. I've mentioned that in some like live videos that I've done on Facebook about Charlie's eyes during the whole detox process that we went through with Pam, leading up to the transition to raw. Charlie's eye color, the hue of blue changed all the time. And once he was on raw and we were still detoxing, I mean, we had already gone through several layers of it, so it's not totally fair to compare it to the beginning. But once we were on that raw, his eye color hue was consistent. So that's also was a big sign to me that this is what was missing for them.
And even your vet noticed it.
Yes. Speaking of vets, that's something else I wanted to bring up. When this kitty got diagnosed with chronic renal failure, we switched veterinarians in 2020 from a vet that I'd gone to for 20 years to the one that we're with now. And the one that we're with now is incredible and an integrative vet and all that kind of stuff. Totally open to holistic and let food be thy medicine type of stuff. The one before, however, was not a fan of raw food. And so that's where I think there's a lot of pushback because somebody, someone that follows Floppycats or Perfectly Holistic or whoever's watching this, and they're interested in raw, it makes sense to them and everything. And they're like, I'm going to talk to my vet about it the next time I go in. And you encounter a vet that's opposed, then you're like, meh. So can you talk at all about why traditional veterinarians are opposed to raw?
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is they're not educated about it. They are taught 3 hours of nutrition in vet school by pet food companies. And that's where you get your prescription diets and all that to treat, I'm going to say, air quote, treat a specific health condition. They are not, I would say most of them have never studied, looked at studies for raw, fresh foods. And, historically, there haven't been a lot of studies, but now there are studies that you can go to and look at. Granted, they've been doing a whole lot more in dogs because dogs are easy to do studies on than cats because cats, it has to be their idea. And they don't want to cooperate. So we don't have a lot of cat studies, but I mean, the body works the same way. We know the difference as humans when we eat fresh whole food diets versus processed food diets. So the evidence is there. Some vets just don't want to look at it. And then, they try to put the whole scare of the whole salmonella and all the, horrible bacteria. But that's really not, it's not a concern for the cats. It's more for the people handling raw food. But if you are used to cooking, in your own home and preparing raw foods, put them on the grill, whatever, bake, you already know how to handle raw food. You wash your hands, you clean your surfaces and all that. Just, it's no different. So we don't have to worry about the cat being harmed by potential bacteria or whatever. Like I said earlier, they have a super acidic stomach. They have a very short digestive tract. It is not going to be in there very long, and their body can handle that kind of stuff. If the food is spoiled, they will not eat it. I can verify that because if, I've had that happen in the past where I've had raw food in my refrigerator thawing one too many days and I put it in the bowl, not realizing it. And the cats look at it and they turn their nose up and they're like, no, thank you. And I'm like, what? What's wrong with it? And so I end up muscle testing it to see if it's still good. It's like, no, it's spoiled. Okay. So, I mean, they know they're not going to eat something that's going to be harmful to them.
Right.
They're not scavengers like wild dogs. They're just not going to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And that is what my vet said. The old vet was about salmonella, and yeah.
They just don't know.
No.
And a lot of them, you know what? If you look in their lobbies, what's in their lobbies? They're selling pet food.
Right.
So they have a financial interest in the food in their clinic, not in the food that you're buying somewhere else. So, you always have to look at, maybe not everybody is motivated by that. Maybe, some are, some not, but, they're not going to go tell you, oh yeah, go get a raw food diet. Just forget all this kibble stuff that's in my clinic.
Right.
There's an interest on some of them. So you just have to be smart. If you try to approach the subject with your vet and they're just like, holy cow, you're going to kill your cat, just shut the conversation down and go, thank you for your input. I'll continue to do my own research. There are so many pet parents these days that are doing their own research, that are, learning the other side of the raw food truth, I'll call it, that are seeing anecdotal results from tons of pets that are eating raw food diets and are thriving and are super healthy, that don't have the metabolic conditions, that don't have the allergies, that don't have all the skin stuff that other pets on processed food are having. And it's phenomenal. The raw food industry is growing exponentially. So you got to look at that.
Yes.
Do your own homework. That's what I say. Yeah.
What I'm gonna have to start making notes because I keep forgetting things that I want to bring up. But one thing that you just said made me think about a reader one time. I had featured a product that was like freeze dried green mussels, and so the reader went and bought it because Charlie and Trigg, ate it on this video ravenously, and so she said, my cats threw up right away. I mean, there was something toxic in the bag. Certainly, I, notified the seller, and then I notified the manufacturer, and they need to like take them all off the shelves. And I was like, no, it could have been totally fine. It could have just been like, your kitty's guts. And so that, like, as we talked about in the beginning of this interview, was that my cats were puking from like spinach or kale and and it wasn't even the meat, and it wasn't that the spinach or kale was bad, it was that their guts energetically couldn't handle it. I don't know. I'm like, Pam knows.
Or they just there's something about their taste buds were like,
Yeah.
They viewed it energetically with disgust. And
Yes.
so it was a stressor. So in a situation like that, it was a new item. They hadn't taken it before. They've never eaten a greenwood mussel before. So it could have been their stomach just having a response like, oh, disgust.
Yes.
It could have become a stressor because it was something new and different.
Yes.
Sometimes that happens. I mean, there's always an emotional component to illness. Organs and tissues hold emotions. They can emit emotions. And so you have to look at that possibility when they do stuff like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a webinar from Julianne Lee from Adored Beast, and she gave a really cool transitioning tip that I want to share here. She was saying that, if you have kibble, if your cat is on kibble and is a kibble addict, but you want to switch to raw, one of the things that you can do is like grind down that kibble into like a fine powder.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of like a baking show or whatever, but she's like, and then take your raw food, roll it into little balls, like, I don't know, maybe the size of a marble, and then roll it on top of the kibble. So on the outside, the cat's like, kibble. But in order to access all that kibble, they have to bite into the raw and get used to that in their taste buds. And I think my friend that I spoke about that did the like micro transition, that also will help like the microbiome, I think, be ready for it. So there's so many cool tips out there too, how to go about it.
Yep. And you can add things like goat's milk, which is loaded with good, healthy bacteria to just prepare the gut for a different protein even. Using stuff like probiotics can just make sure when you're transitioning, you just add that layer of healthy gut flora in the gut so that, it minimizes the chances of them having any kind of a GI upset when you transition. But if your cat does have like a throw up or, a little runny stool or something like that, don't freak out. That's just the body's way of transitioning. It should resolve within a day or two. And then, of course, my go-to for stuff like that doesn't resolve right away is homeopathy. So you don't have to necessarily run off to the vet and get all scared and freaked out. It's just a normal process.
Yes. Yes. And I actually had no idea. I'm not scared of my cats vomiting. I mean, it gets sort of annoying for pickup, and I feel badly for them sometimes because I don't like to puke myself. But in general, I'm not really bothered by it. But that reader that I was referencing earlier, it sounded as if she's not used to her cats vomiting at all. And I thought, oh, don't go through a detox with Pam then. You're going to be vomiting.
Not necessarily. It just depends.
Yes.
It just depends.
Yes. Well, in other words, the time that vomiting is scary is when it's over and over and over again and they're dehydrated. My cats
Yeah.
weren't doing that. I need to be
No,
clear about that.
no.
If that was happening, then that's time to go see the vet and see what the heck's going on the inside. But no, this was just
If
yeah.
it's regurgitation, like they eat it
Yes.
and then they turn around and do a bleh, that's
Yes.
probably like a food stressor kind of thing.
Exactly.
Oh, no, the stomach's saying, no, disgust.
Right. Right. So I think at one point you had to transition, like not a kitten, but one of your cats. Like you came home from the vet and put the kibble bag in the trash. I think I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah, that's when I threw the kibble out. I had just put down a cat kidney disease.
Oh,
And that was the third one I had lost. And that was my lesson. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done watching them suffer and go through this when if I just fed them an appropriate diet that would support their kidneys instead of dehydrate them and stress them for all of their life, she would live longer, you know? So that was a turning point. Like, okay, I don't know what took me so long. And I think in my head, I was worried about cost. You know, we all think about those financial questions. Um, but at the end of the day, if I had transitioned all of my cats from the dry to the wet to the raw, it probably would have had a few more years with some of them, and obviously a few less vet bills. You know, they would have been healthier.
yes.
You know,
Yes. One of the things that inspired me, I mean, I've known since my cats were 6 that I wanted them on raw, so it's been a long time coming. Um, but this guy, he declined for 6 months. I mean, I think they gave him like 2 months to live, but I was doing the sub-Q fluids and ozone and everything and just going all over the place. And that's a long caregiver process.
mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have traded it for the world. He was incredible. But when I was watching one of the Ask Julie Anythings with Adored Beast, Julianne Lee said that one thing that she noticed in her clinics through the years was that the raw fed pets, it was very easy to tell when they were done. Like when it was time to put them down, when it was, and,
Interesting.
and I was like, oh, yes, because Camus was on a all wet food diet, but it wasn't the best wet foods because his brother only would eat fish. And so then you've got the mercury level problems and
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. And that really excited me because so many times in that 6 months, I was like, is it now? Do I do it now? Okay, no, we recovered. We can keep going. So I don't know how Charlie and Trigg will go, but I like the idea of if their body is on a more healthy diet, then you'll have a better idea of when it's time to say goodbye. And that would take a lot of stress off of that whole kidney disease problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't reverse aging, and organs eventually just wear out. That's
Yes.
part of the aging process. But it doesn't have to be, you know, uh, months of stress and suffering. You know.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the readers that told me about fetching foods was she had a 21-year-old chronic kidney failure cat. And that's the other cool thing about fetching foods is they can do custom meals.
Mm-hmm.
So and instead of using bone, he'll use like eggshell, and then
Yeah.
that's easier on the kidneys. So
Mm-hmm.
you can still feed raw because that's the other thing is they'll tell you low phosphorus and low protein diet for a kidney cat, but that's not necessarily needed.
No, you never want to give a cat a low protein diet
Right.
because they're carnivores.
Yes.
Then they get muscle wasting. They
Yes.
need the protein. What they need is a a lower phosphorus. So there are ways we can improve or change out the phosphorus sources, like the eggshell calcium, but adding hydration and things like that. But you want a highly digestible protein. So there you go with your raw. It's highly digestible. It's easy to nutritionally absorb. It's easy for their body to assimilate versus a dry food, which is not natural for them to digest and assimilate, or a low quality rendered kind of protein, which is not highly nutritious and can be very toxic. So that's not ideal for the body to process either. So when you go to something fresh, raw, you're giving their body the best nutrition that they can identify and go, oh yes, we know what this is, and we know how to break this down, and we know how to utilize it. So it's really nice.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad I'm on the other side, because I used to be the person watching these videos being like, how am I going to do this ever?
Yeah, it's not as hard as you think.
No. Now I know because of you, but thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything that I've left out that you'd like to mention?
No, we've covered a lot.
We have.
We have.
Good. All right. Well, I will include a link to where you guys can find Pam online. And if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Pam, thank you.
You're welcome.
All three of us. Thank you. Bye, guys.
We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.